Hey, everyone. Hey, everyone. This is Dr. Tara. Welcome to Dr. Tara Tuesdays. And I am so excited about our conversation tonight. I'm going to give people a chance to tune in. If you're just tuning in, you may want to grab a pen and a piece of paper or your favorite journal, just because in this conversation around authenticity, I want to be authentic in our discussion. And I'm going to be asking people to do some self reflection just on around values and beliefs. So if you have a moment, grab a pen, paper, your favorite journal. But I want to welcome you. Hey, everyone. Feel free to leave a comment. Say hey to me. Hey, Patrice. So as you come in, because we are going to have an open and honest conversation, I want to hear from you all in the comments. One of the things that I love about the Dr. Tara community is the support and the honesty that people show within the comments. And I don't want us to shy away from this conversation tonight. I actually was thinking about this topic. So, hey, if you're just tuning in, was thinking about this topic because the word authenticity gets thrown around a lot. And we started to talk about it last week, but I really wanted to delve deep into it. And so this past weekend, and it's funny because I had this awesome idea for the session for today. And then this past weekend, I went to a get together. And one of the first things that they talked about was authenticity. And so I want to do this exercise with us within the Dr. Tara community. So I see some of you are on here, so hopefully you'll tune in, you'll join in. But the question they asked us is, how would you describe yourself based on who you are, not what you do? And the reason why I want to ask that question too is because I think a lot of times when we talk about authentic behaviors, we automatically jump to or feel connected to what we do, right? So I'm a this, I'm a this, I'm a this, and not to negate any of that. But if you were to take that away from you, I want you all to put in the comments who you are. How would you describe yourself? How would you introduce yourself if you were meeting someone new based on who you are as an individual? And from that, I want to open up this conversation. Like I said, today we're going to start the process of digging deep into the work of creating authentic spaces for ourselves and those we love, but starting with that comment, who you are versus what you do. And so I want to give us a few moments to answer that question in the comment. And yes, thanks, Shamia. So how would you introduce yourself based on who you are and not what you do? How do you show up? Because when we talk about creating authentic spaces, one of the things that we want to remember is that authenticity, if we look at the definition, is really around how our beliefs and values correlate or connect with how we're living our actual lives. And so if you're just tuning in, hey, everyone, welcome to Dr. Tara Tuesdays. I posed a question to the group or to the community, the Dr. Tara community. How would you describe or introduce yourself based on who you are as a person and not what you do? So no roles, no titles, but based on who you are as an individual. How would you describe yourself? Please answer in the comments. And as we wait for you all to answer, I want to keep going because I want to talk about when we think about authenticity, what that means. And so as we think about authenticity, and even if you don't want to share it in the comments, I urge you all to have your journal or piece of paper. But thinking about, oh, thanks, Patrice. I'm an encourager, believer, sister, and a friend. Yes. And you're also someone who does not like to see the comment section empty, and I appreciate it. So, yeah. So Patrice gave a great answer. I'm an encourager, believer, sister, and a friend. And so, again, thinking about those characteristics that define us. Shawnee, I'm a seeker. So, again, who we are versus what we do. And noticing if there's any difficulty in that response. Meaning if we notice that there's any pull to be a role or be a title or be, whatever we have been identified as versus what we identify ourselves as. And so when we talk about authenticity, one of the things that we have to get on the same page about is what it means to us. And that starts with our beliefs and our values. And so if you are listening and you have, Maurice, I'm a spiritual loyal person. Thank you for that. If you're listening and you have your journal, one of the things that I want to ask you, when you think about your values and your motivations, what are they? What values do you have? What beliefs do you have? What motivates you? And what influences your daily decisions? What things influence your daily decisions? And as you think about this, and again, this can be very personal. You can write it in your own personal journal or diary, or you can put it in the comments. As you think about it and as you start to dissect it, I want you to notice whether or not those values, motivations, and your drive are internal, or we've been taught to look for external validation for that. And the reason why I ask that, thank you, Tina, I'm spiritual, nurturing, determined, quiet, and a leader. Thank you. These are beautiful responses. And so when we think about our values and our motivation, those things determine our beliefs. And one of the things that we talk about when we're talking about authenticity is, how have I gotten those values? Do I even understand what they are? Do I even believe them? Or are those things that have been given to me? Have they been created for me and I've just kind of gone along with it? One of the biggest struggles that I often see when we talk about authenticity is how many people struggle with identifying what they truly believe. And you can give me a thumbs up in the comments, or you can write something in the comments too, if you've ever felt stuck or you've ever felt the pressure to go along with what either society, what our parents, what a job expects of us, and the pressure that it then puts on us internally to maintain whatever images have been given to us. And when we find that, one of the things that you usually start to see when my inner choices, right, don't coincide with my outer behavior, we usually start to feel that on an emotional level, on a spiritual level, and even on a physical level. Our anxiety often increases. We feel like we're living that double life. And like you're saying, definitely. And so when we're talking about that, what we're talking about is that out of alignment experience. And one of the things that often happens when I am not maintaining an authentic lifestyle is I start to carry that burden into other areas of my life. And what we tend to do is, when I'm not living authentically for myself, I try to create a sense of control in other relationships, which is why the talk of today is authentic spaces for ourselves and those we love. And so, Christine, I want to go to your comment. I've definitely had to put the work in to change the narrative in my head. Learning who you are requires you being vulnerable, and is so brave. That's definitely it. Because when we talk about authenticity, I want us to think about healing on a scope. So I'm going to talk with my hands. So when we talk about the scope of healing, or when we talk about healing, it goes on scope, which is lateral, right? Meaning that, okay, I'm checking this off. Yeah, I'm going to sign up for this. Yes, I'm going to do this. Yes, I'm going to this meeting. But then when we talk about true healing, it goes through depth. So we have scope, which is lateral, but depth goes deep, meaning that I have to start to peel back layers that start to address how I got here. What things made me who I am? Where did I get my beliefs from? What things have I ever shared? What are my desires that I've been told that, one, I don't deserve to have in some way, shape, or form? What desires have I been taught that don't align with who society says I am, or who my family says I am, or whatever goals or dreams that I have? And so making sure that when we talk about values and motivation, they also include our desires, and asking ourselves, am I living that life truly? And so as you all write in your journals, I want you to write again what values, like Shamia talked about, what things influence your daily decisions. And then looking at whether or not our behaviors, and Christina, you just said it, are check boxes, right? So I'm doing this today, I'm doing this today, I'm doing this today. That's scope. But when we talk about true healing, it requires that depth. Am I willing to dig deep? How have I been learning about myself? How have I been receiving situations where I haven't shown up true to myself? How have I received situations where I haven't shown up true to myself? And then what have I done about it? Because when we talk about the quest for authenticity, one of the things that I'm a believer of is that when you are looking for something, you find it. There's a meditation that we do that's called Try. And it's called, let me see if I can remember it. Seek, find, hold, and remain. There's a meditation that so if you seek something, you're going to find it. Then we hold it in our mind and we remain in that state. And so when we talk about authenticity, that requires us to try. So the definition of try from a Buddhist perspective is that seek, find, hold, and remain. Meaning that if I seek something, I'm going to find it. So if I seek to discover deeper levels of myself, I'm going to find it. But where it starts to get into that scope versus depth is, am I willing to hold myself accountable for moments where I'm inauthentic? And what am I willing to do to remain there? What am I willing to do to develop some kind of consistent practice that makes me show up, or allows me rather to show up for who I am? And so I want to pose a question to us because I have so much information and I'm so excited. But I want to pose a question because I want to get your feedback. But when we talk about living inauthentically, I want to ask you all, where did that come from for us? Like how was I given different images of myself? Was it personal? Was it more professional? And where are we with that now? So how was I given different images of myself, or what images of myself was I given? Did they hold true to my beliefs and values? And where am I with those images and self narratives? And like Christine, you said, those self narratives that I've been taught, and where am I with unlearning them and relearning something else? Thank you, Shamia, for writing that down. Seek, find, hold, and remain. And as you all write in the comments, I want you then, if you're using your journal tonight too, to then answer the question fully. Am I living up to my truest potential, or have I found myself playing it safe? And I want us to put some thought to that. Am I living up to my truest potential, or am I playing it safe? One of the other meditations that I am a big fan of asks us to look at comparison, but not comparison with others, right? Because comparison is not only the thief of joy, it's the thief of accountability. Because what it says is that compared to others, you're doing fine. But compared to your own potential, that's where we start to see the gaps in authenticity. And so when we talk about those gaps, one of the things that we're going to be looking at is where those areas where I play it safe, what has allowed me to play it safe for so long? Where does that fear come from? And do I have enough strength? Do I have enough inner resources, safe spaces to start to push back and challenge that? And am I willing to look at it differently? And so as you all write in the comments, and this is a good comment section already, but as you all write in the comments, one of the things that we want to talk about is, again, where did it come from? What images of myself was I given? Did they hold true to my values? Where am I learning something else? Am I living up to my truest potential, or am I playing it safe? And when we talk about playing it safe, I just want to define that a little bit more, is that usually what we see is that we feel divided, right? Meaning that I'm living two lives, or I'm thinking of like the mask that we wear. Okay, I show up in this relationship this way. I show up in this relationship this way. I show up in this relationship this way. And all of them get pieces of me, but nowhere am I able to show up for myself. And a lot of times the overlying concern or the overlying desire is the ability rather to show up somewhere and be able to take those roles off. I'm going to talk about meditation. There's another meditation that we often do where I ask people to visualize, and I spoke about this on a self-care Saturday. I ask people to visualize themselves standing in front of a mirror. And I ask them to see themselves kind of cloaked in armor. And you all can put it in the comments. We can live out this meditation and fill in all the roles that they have to play for all the people in their lives. The role of parent, role of partner, role of friend, role of sister, brother, grandparent, aunt, uncle, whatever, employer, employee, all the roles that you have to play in your life, right? Because a lot of times we can't take that away. And so authenticity means that regardless of whatever role I have to play, I can show up as my truest self. And what I then ask people to do is then visualize removing those roles one by one, allowing the role of parent to fall to the floor, allowing the role of partner to fall to the floor, allowing the role of aunt or uncle to fall to the floor until you are standing left looking at just yourself in this mirror, in this reflection. And then I ask the question, understanding the roles that you have to play, what is it that you need in order to fulfill those roles for all the people in your life? What is it that you need? What is it that you need to receive? And then the other side of that is, what is it that you need to let go of in order to fulfill these roles in your life? And so the struggle, and then again, I'm going into depth, is how am I able to allow myself to receive it, whether it's more time, more patience, more energy, more non-judgmental attitudes. What do I need to let go of, whether it's control, whether it's anxiety? And that allows us then to be authentically ourselves versus spreading ourselves so thin and meeting other people's expectations or creating expectations that other people may have had that we really don't even believe. And so, Christina, like you're saying, I had to unlearn that I am more than my roles. For example, I can be a mother, a woman, a partner, and they may conflict. I also had to unlearn what I saw growing up. And that's so true because, again, when we talk about the images or our identity, I rather say identity, a lot of times we don't create our identities until we become an adult. Our identities are given to us. You are this, you are this, you are this, and so even identities such as you are such a good boy, you're such a good girl. And I'm going to touch on parenting just a little bit because, thank you, Christina. Yes, give me a TV show already. So because when we talk about it, then people start to behave the way that they are identified. And so when we talk about identity, one of the areas that we often get stuck in, even though we outgrow it chronologically, but developmentally, a lot of us still get stuck in that identity versus identity diffusion, meaning that this is the identity that I see for myself. And identity diffusion is, this is the identity that others have given to me. And you all can put this in the comments. This is a safe space, but weeding out and kind of sifting through those conflicts. Like, this is how I see myself, yet this is how other people see me. And where's the conflict? And how do I show up as myself, regardless of how other people see me? And the reality of this is that a lot of times we become scared to be authentic. And I want to pose that question. What is the fear that oftentimes comes with authenticity? What is the fear that oftentimes comes with authenticity? And I want you to think about that. And so not as the fear, but I'll change it to say, what is my fear? And a lot of times for people, it's, I'm scared I'm going to lose a relationship. I'm scared I'm going to offend someone. I'm scared I'm going to make someone upset. I'm scared that there's going to be conflict. I'm scared that I won't be accepted. And so when we talk about authenticity, the comfort sometimes that allows us to stay on the scope, like, oh, okay, I'm doing this a little bit, is that the comfort of a false acceptance feels better than my true authenticity, right? The comfort of a false acceptance feels better than true authenticity. And so, Patrice, you talked about the fear of rejection. I'm scared that I'm going to lose someone. And I want to play with that for a minute, because a lot of times when we think about that fear, every time that I move in a way that's inauthentic or unauthentic to myself, I'm the one that's actually rejecting me, right? So the fear actually plays out that I'm doing to myself the thing that someone else is doing to me. The moment that I move out of fear of rejection of someone else, I'm actually rejecting myself. The moment that I'm moving out of fear because someone else won't accept me is I'm not accepting myself. And so when we talk about that, one of the things that we want to work through is, am I willing to provide myself the safe space of comfort, the safe space of reassurance, so that in all situations, I can give myself that comfort and it doesn't depend on someone else. I was having a conversation with someone earlier today, and we were talking about parenting, and we were talking about unhealthy relationships. We're going to get into unhealthy relationships in a little bit, but a lot of times when we talk about inauthentic behaviors, those are behaviors that have been taught to us since we were children, right? We're taught, give this person a hug even though you don't want to, speak to this person even though you don't want to, make space for this person even though you don't want to, do this for this person, even though you don't want to, even though you've said you don't want to, right? And so what does that teach us over time? It teaches us to distrust our own inner voice, right? So I don't want to do this, but now it becomes wrong. So I'll actually shame myself, or I'll feel guilty about not wanting to do something or not want to show up. And I still make myself do it because I've been taught and I've been trained that my voice is not sufficient. I have to get it from someone else. And so when we talk about this too, one of the things that we want to acknowledge is, if you're doing this in a journal, and even if you have to come back, is where can I start that provides me the most amount of ease, the most amount of grace, and the most amount of comfort to allow myself to move through this journey. And I'm always big on this. And if you've been with me, you know that I always talk about two things that we need in our healing journey. One is honesty and one is compassion. Because when we're talking about healing cannot happen unless I'm honest with myself, unless I can acknowledge the times where I'm showing up inauthentic, as an unauthentic or inauthentic self. And then I have to give myself compassion for that, understanding that a lot of times inauthenticity comes as a result of fear and comes as a result, and like you said, Patrice, fear of rejection. And so where am I willing to give myself, and Shamia, thank you for writing that down, the safe space of comfort and reassurance in this process. And so when we talk about creating authentic spaces, one of the things that we have to say, and I love this question, again, I'm using some of the questions that they asked us this past weekend, is that when these things happen, right? So when I show up in a space that I am being inauthentic and I get that pushback, right? Because a lot of times that creates resentment. I don't know if any of you feel that way, but I'll give myself my own thumbs up, because when I show up not as myself, it gives me a feeling of resentment, first to me, but then I project it onto the other person, right? As in, you don't allow me to be me. And we know that from a cognitive level, I'm the only one that's going to allow myself not to be myself, but it feels like that, maybe based on relationship patterns or whatever. But when we find ourselves being inauthentic, the question that we have to ask is, do I take action, right? Do I take responsibility for my actions, or do I play the victim? And the reason I ask this is because, again, when we talk about healing, and I'm going to go trauma informed, that there are no victims, there are only survivors, right? But when I play the victim, I can't show up in this space because of this person. I can't show up in this space because of this job, or I can't show up in this space because of society. We talk about that all the time. Society won't allow people to be such and such. Society won't allow us to be happy. Society won't allow us to break down. Society won't allow us to cry. What that does is that it creates a cycle of blame. And so when we talk about blame, right, blame automatically places me as the victim. As long as I'm able to blame you, as long as I'm able to blame myself, right? So, oh my gosh, I couldn't do it because of whatever reason. As long as I'm able to place blame, then I never have to change. And I want to state that I can't state that any more PC or nicer, but as long as I'm able to place blame on whatever, society, a person, my mother, my father, this person or that, I never have to change. And so when we talk about this, and some famous, I hope I'm saying your name right, people lie to themselves all the time, then start believing the lie. Well, that's true, right? So when we talk about a belief, and I'll go into that too, when we talk about a belief, let's break that down. So what is a belief? A belief is a thought that we just think, right? A belief is a thought that we just think over and over and over and over again until it becomes ingrained in our psyche and becomes ingrained in our mind. And so when we talk about the lie, a lot of times that lie is a true belief. I really believe that, right? I believe that to be my reality. And the danger with that is that when I believe that to be my reality, it involves blame, I become a victim. And when I become a victim of inauthenticity, then I never have to change, because someone else is always going to be responsible for my inability to show up. And so when we talk about the healing process, and again, you all can add in your comments, add in your thumbs up with that too. But when we talk about the healing process, the first thing that we have to start with is the mindset that I have the determination, I have the opportunity, and I'm worthy of being my true self. And so one of the things that I'll often ask people to do, and you can write this in your journal, is what are my limiting beliefs? What are they? Let's put them out there. A lot of times our limiting beliefs, and I'll go back to Damus, and again, I hope I'm saying your name right, but one of the things that often happens with limiting beliefs is that, again, they become so ingrained in my mind, I'm not even aware of them, but they only are evident in my behaviors, right? So this is where, when we talk about authenticity, this is where we start to see self-sabotaging behaviors, right? Things are going so well for me. Things are going so great. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And this went well. And I had this phone call and this went well. And then I dropped the ball because I haven't learned to show up in those spaces as my true self. So what are my limiting beliefs? Because Damien, like you say, the mind is the battleground. What are they? Let me write them down, right? What have I been taught about myself? Now, I asked you all in the beginning of the live, how would you describe yourself based on who you are? And so limiting beliefs challenge our identity or our identification of ourselves. And so the one column, what are my limiting beliefs? And in the other column, we literally start to write down my challenge to those limiting beliefs, right? How do I hold myself accountable? Oh, thank you. So when we talk about that, I literally start to see, okay, well, I'm not smart enough. I'm not thin enough. I'm not such and such enough. We literally write the opposite of that. And as you're doing that in your columns, one of the things that we would do further is, out of those challenging beliefs, not the limiting beliefs, but those challenging beliefs that spur us to be more authentic, is which one is easiest for me to believe right now? Which one is easy for us to believe right now? Because if I stay stuck in those limiting beliefs, just like Christina is saying, it will spiral to a place where I am in this hole, and the only thing I'm going to surround me by is these limiting beliefs. Because the interesting thing about that limiting belief is that those limiting beliefs also work, and I gave you all the definition of pride too, because once I find one, right, I seek, I find, right? I seek a limiting belief. I find a limiting belief. I hold it. How do I hold it? Because I think of all the other times this limiting belief came out to pass, right? All the other times I self-sabotage, or all the other times where I couldn't do something. And that allows me to remain, right? Try works both ways, in healthy behaviors and unhealthy behaviors. And so when we talk about challenging those limiting beliefs, I have to be willing to try to unlearn them and try to see them differently. And so when we start to do that process, it goes back to those values and beliefs. So if I think that, and I'll just give one that I think we all can relate to, I'm going to get in shape, but I can't get in shape, right? I may be telling myself, my son is 14, I'm still trying to lose baby weight. So my limiting belief is I can't lose baby weight, right? So I'm not going to try, because I'm blaming this on this 14-year-old. But my challenge is, I can do such and such. I can go to the gym. I can do that. And so what we then start to do is, how can I try to find other thoughts that are going to support my challenging belief, right? How am I going to start to find other people, other environments that support my self-fulfilling beliefs, my authentic belief about myself or about my situation? And that requires us to identify safe people and safe places, but then also identify unsafe people and unsafe places. So I want to ask you all a question, and you can just answer this by giving me a thumbs up. But how many of us, if we were having a great day, we have somebody in our lives that we can call, right? I can share this information with you. There's somebody in my circle that I can call if I was having a great day. If I won concert tickets to my favorite artist on the radio, there's somebody I'm going to call, right? So I see some thumbs up. And then on the flip side, you can give me another thumbs up too. How many of us have people in our lives where if we were not having a great day, I know I'm not going to call this person, right? I know that if I'm having a bad day, I'm not going to call this person. And so when we think about that, one of the things that often happens when people are in their healing process is that we begin to share our quest for authenticity. We begin to share our new desires, our new beliefs with people who may not be the safest for us. And so I see you. Thank you, Teresa and Tina. So when we think about that, one of the things that we want to create when we're talking about authenticity is creating not just safe spaces, but also sacred spaces, meaning that I am not going to share. A lot of times authenticity is personal before it's public, right? I'm a big believer in that, like make it personal before it's public. Somebody put that on a t-shirt. It has to be personal before it becomes public, because I want to make sure that I'm in alignment first before I seek external validation. And that goes against literally the way that we've been taught to behave. Just as a society, I'm going to make a decision and then I broadcast it, right? I'm going to start doing, girl, I'm going to start going to the gym, or I'm going to start setting boundaries, or I'm going to start doing such and such. And then all it takes is one little moment of doubt coming from oftentimes someone else who is very well intentioned. And like Christina said, it starts that spiral down back to my limiting beliefs. And that's where we begin to self-sabotage. And so what we want to do as we are creating and honoring spaces for authenticity is start to protect those spaces, meaning that I want to give myself, and this comes from the stages of change, I want to give myself the opportunity to build up enough momentum so that I see some progress under my belt. And with that, I don't become scared of that progress. A lot of times when we talk about creating authentic spaces, people will begin to assert themselves. I'm going to begin going to the gym. I'm going to begin speaking my mind. I'm going to begin being an artist. I heard some of you mention that. I'm going to begin seeking things, right? And then something happens, or I begin to do it. And I notice that it allows me to create identity, and I don't know what my identity is any longer. And so the first person that change impacts is us. The very first person that change impacts is us. And so I have to struggle with that change a little bit. I have to come into peace and alignment with that change that allows me to create new values and new beliefs, and answering the question, well, where did this come from? Do I even agree with it? And am I willing to think differently about it? And so when we do that, we're able to, again, go deeper. That's that depth part. And we see ourselves becoming less of an imitation of what we think we should be, or what we have been told that we should be or should not be. And a lot of times when we do that, that disrupts relationships. And this goes back to Patrice's earlier point about feeling that rejection. And part of our work is to understand that healing work is going to bring in people who are aligned with our mission and vision too. So if I'm in relationships that don't support my authenticity, then that relationship is going to be modified some way that still allows me to be my authentic self. And that may mean that that relationship has to come with boundaries. That may mean that that relationship has to come with scripted conversations for a period of time. That may mean that that relationship has to come when we can talk about the safest topic, right? We can talk about the weather. We can talk about this. But when it comes to personal desires and personal values and personal changes, I'm going to protect that space and not open it up to judgment or scrutiny or rejection, because I'm not at that space. And this is where that honesty and compassion comes in. I'm not at that space where I can receive it and not go back to that limiting belief. And so when we're on our authentic, and I hope this makes sense. I can't see you all, so give me a thumbs up if it makes sense. And so if we are on our authentic journey, one of the things that we have to give ourselves is the opportunity to create spaces where we show up for ourselves, just being ourselves, and we see that our authentic self is accepted. And so as we figure this out, I want you all to answer the question, when we talk about living up to our fullest potential, and again, you can do it with your journal, you can do it in the comments, what would that look like? What would me living up to my fullest potential look like? And more importantly, I actually want to change it. What would it feel like? What feelings would it bring up for me? How would I approach myself? How would I see myself if I was doing that visualization? Because the goal with that meditation that I was talking to you all about earlier, with the different roles that we play, the goal is for me to see myself as a person first before I become any other role. And Christina, you talked about the parenting piece, and that parenting piece is so hard because so often, for those of you who are parents or parent figures, we kind of hold ourselves to a standard, one that may not even be realistic, but then two, that has been given to us about what parenting looks like, what being a child looks like, what being a husband or being a wife looks like. And so when I do that, a lot of times I set myself up for failure. I set myself up for shame or guilt or overcompensation. And then I set myself up to be in a relationship where we're both being inauthentic because I'm scared to say something to you, you're scared to say something to me, or we're scared to be ourselves out of that fear of rejection. And that allows a dynamic of power and control to come into our lives. And so when we think about creating safe spaces for people that we love, one of the things that we have to acknowledge is that when it comes to authenticity, our goal in relationships is to not depend on someone else for our happiness, but to allow them to add to the joy we're already bringing in our lives. A lot of times when we are living inauthentic lives, I am dependent on someone else to bring me my happiness, which is why when they don't do those things, which is how that creates a power dynamic, there's usually some strife or struggle because I'm trying to control their behavior because I've conditioned myself and unfortunately I've conditioned them to believe that their behavior or my happiness is directly tied to their behavior. And this is not to say that people's behaviors won't influence us. This is to say that people have the right not to change. And that is a hard pill to swallow because a lot of times people will come to me, and I know if you're a mental health professional, how do I change so-and-so? How do I change this person? How do I get them to see this? How do I get them to understand this? And a hard pill that we have to swallow on our road to healing is that my healing does not require that you change, and vice versa. You have the right to stay the exact same way. And what that then allows for me to then question or answer the question is, in my authentic self, is this a relationship that is healthy and supports me showing up authentically? And when we are able to do that, but that's going to take some work. I'm saying this a lot faster than the actual process. This can take months, this can take years. But when we're able to do that, what it does is that it takes someone else off the hook. And again, it doesn't place us in that blame game where we become the victim of someone else's behaviors. And again, this is not to say that the way people behave do not impact us. We do. That is very true. Your behaviors impact people. I have a reaction to your behaviors. However, when I am tying my healing into your behaviors, a lot of times I'll talk to people and who have been hurt and are justified in their hurt. And the danger with a justified hurt, and I'm speaking from personal experience here, the danger with a justified hurt is that it becomes one of the reasons why I can't live authentically or why I can't change because my hurt is justified. They were wrong in doing this. They were wrong when they said this. They were wrong when they did this. And because of that, I have to act this way. And that's not authentic living. Authentic living is if I believe this, then I'm acting this way, you know? And so when we hold on to that, what that does, one, is that it's very emotionally draining, but then those emotions become physically draining. It's exhausting to live inauthentically. It is, it's exhausting. You're more likely to have headaches. You're more likely to have somatic symptoms. You're more likely to experience anxiety. And so when we talk about showing up authentically and creating authentic spaces, it means that I take off the pressure from both myself and from other people to be responsible for my happiness and be responsible for my joy. And the interesting thing is that it starts with our children, it starts with our spouses, it starts with our parents, it starts with our siblings, it starts with our friends. I'm going to allow you to be yourself and trust that your journey is going to lead you to a place of authenticity too. But it doesn't have to be as a result of me being inauthentic or you being inauthentic. We can both take our journeys and come together when we're able to add and benefit each other's lives. And so when we talk about, and I'm getting ready to sum this up because 40 minutes have gone by so fast, but when we talk about creating authentic spaces, and if you have questions, please put them in the comments. So when we talk about creating authentic spaces for the people that we love, Christina, I'm glad you asked that because I'm just getting into that. One of the things that we talk about is how do I allow them to show up, right? So having conversations. So if we're talking about people that we love, whether it's child, whether it's partner, How do you show up? Are you answering this question truthfully? One of the questions that I love asking people when I ask them a question is, are you answering this question just so I'll stop talking to you? Or are you engaging in this conversation just so I'll stop the conversation? Or are you really believing that this is how you feel? And so when we do that, one of the things that we are doing is giving people permission to be themselves. So I remember when I was in grad school, one of the things that they taught us about therapy is that the role of a therapist is to give people permission to be themselves. Everyone is looking for permission to be themselves, right? That's oftentimes why people come to therapy. That's oftentimes why people seek feedback, right? Whether it's a therapist, whether it's a best friend. Do you think I'm right in doing this? I'm seeking permission, and that's okay. I'm saying that because I don't want people to get defensive. And so when I give someone permission to be themselves, what I'm saying is that we can disagree and we can do it in a way that's still kind and supportive of each other. You can have your opinion, and that's okay because we're still kind and supportive of each other. And I'm able to find happiness within myself, and I'm going to give you the space to do that within yourself. So the first step in that too is relinquishing control. And this is very, very hard, especially if you are a parent and you're talking, Christine, I don't know who your question is guided towards, but I'm going to answer both as a parent and also as the partner, because control comes in both of those. But we can really go every relationship because there's an element of power and control in that. And so when I think about giving up or relinquishing control, that means that when someone shares their desires with me, or when someone shares their beliefs with me, doing a self-inventory, is my first response to give feedback, or is my first response to listen to at what they're actually saying? And the reason why I start with that is because so many of us are trained to respond, but we haven't been trained to listen, right? So at the moment I first see you, I'm giving you feedback on how you look. I'm giving you feedback on what you say. I'm giving you feedback on how you feel, whether or not you're eating enough, right? I authentically may not be hungry, but you know what? You're going to eat today. Just little details. When I'm in a space with you, am I listening and observing, or am I constantly giving you feedback and judgment? And because a lot of times too, feedback is kind of masked or judgment is kind of masked in well-intentioned feedback. Am I allowing you to be yourself? And then when it comes to children, and I'll speak on this for parents, part of our job then becomes to be a guide. And so meaning that as a parent, I'm going to deposit in you as much as possible. I'm going to expose you to things as much as possible. And I'm going to allow you some autonomy to create an environment that still gives you a sense of control and gives you a sense of boundaries. Now, you can do this in a very respectful way, but I'm still going to give you that space, right? We can identify what those parameters are, but I'm going to give you that space to, one, create autonomy, meaning that you get to create an identity for yourself. And with that too, especially for those of us who are parents, having conversations where their identity comes from. So much for teenagers and young children comes from the images that they see. And so a lot of times teenagers, younger children are taking on identities that are inauthentic to who they are because they think that they have to fit into a mold. So I want to say that too. When it comes to partners, talking about creating spaces for the people that we love, it really starts with control. One of the things that is so evident or becomes so relevant in partnerships, and this is relationships, so I'll talk about adult relationships, whether it's romantic, platonic, friendship, whatever, is a power struggle. And so the power struggle embodies either the need to control, the need to be right, the need to convince, or sometimes the need to shame, right? So I need to make you feel bad. And so doing a self-inventory, am I doing any of those things when we're having a conversation? Am I doing any of those things when we have a disagreement? Am I doing any of those things when I feel bad and I have to now shame you because you didn't do enough to make me feel better? And so when we talk about creating those safe spaces, it means that you don't have to apologize for who you are. I don't have to apologize for who I am, and we can still show up for each other. And so part of it, when we talk about, or not part of it, all of it, when we talk about creating authenticity for ourselves and those safe spaces for those we love, requires that depth and doing that self-assessment and self-reflection. And then when we do it, and you talked about the last two, when I'm doing those things, right? So the need to shame, the need to control, the need to be right. Am I able to come back and have a conversation and say, hey, I noticed that I was doing this with you, and that's not my intention? Because I don't want you to have to apologize for what you are, even if I believe that it is dead wrong, even if I'm justified in my action, one of the biggest gifts of freedom that we can give ourselves and to other people is to allow them to be who they are, right? People show us, that's true. People show us who they are. And then in our quest to control, in our quest to make them less authentic, make ourselves less authentic, we come into these relationships where it becomes a control battle, right? You love me if, you don't love me if. Now that's very different than saying, that someone is unhealthy for us. Someone's authentic self, and Christina, you and I are doing this together. I don't know if you know this, but someone's authentic self can be very unhealthy for us, right? And so when we see that, part of our response to that is being honest and not forcing ourselves to be inauthentic and allow that behavior. If my authentic reaction to your authentic self is unhealthy, then that's a red flag. And part of authenticity is honoring these red flags and choosing to be in relationships that don't produce them. And so that again goes back to our beliefs. Maybe my limiting belief is that relationships look a certain way where control and power are a part of those relationships, and challenging that belief and saying relationships allow me to be myself in the company of someone who's also themselves, and it feels safe, right? Safety trumps everything. And it feels like I'm returning home, and it feels like I want to get out the car and see them, not make home my last stop of the day and wait 15 minutes before I walk in the house because just the sight of them is exhausting to me. Right. And so we have to acknowledge that, too. And a lot of times when we think about that inauthenticity, and Christina, again, I'm glad you brought that up, acknowledging when those triggers show up for us, whether it's with anybody, right, whether it's with anybody, and taking the necessary steps to keep ourselves safe and to keep ourselves healthy and to have those conversations if we're within the context of a safe relationship. So when we talk about authenticity, so again, if you have any other questions, drop them in the comments. We got about 3 more minutes before we begin to wrap up. But when we talk about authenticity, and Christina, I hope I answered your question. My 3 takeaways for the conversation tonight is literally taking that time to define your values, your beliefs, and the things that bring you joy, right? Takeaway 1, define your values, not anyone else's. Define your values. And values, how do I know that I value this? I know that I value this because when I think about it, it brings me a sense of peace. It brings me a sense of purpose, right? So someone talked about, I value, I just keep thinking of Shawnee's, I value seeking, right? So when I think about seeking, when I think about being a creator, it brings me peace, right? It brings me joy. It brings me purpose. So define what my values are, define what my beliefs are, and define my joys. And define them in a way that's unapologetic for us having them. A lot of times when we think about our values, our beliefs, and our joys, if those things haven't been allowed to be expressed, there's a little bit of shame. And I just want to speak honestly, there's a little bit of shame that may come with that, right? Well, I value this, but someone else may not, so I feel bad about it. Maybe I need to know, what are they? And then 2, identify your behaviors that match those values, those beliefs, and those joys, and begin to do them, right? So these are my values, these are my beliefs, these are my joys. What behaviors allow me to know that I'm living out my values, my beliefs, and my joys? So if I value self-care, am I taking a nap? Am I eating well? Am I being around people that pour into me, right? And just check off the ones that I'm doing, right? Which one am I doing the most? Which one, you know what, these are the behaviors, but I haven't done this since I was 12, right? What are the behaviors that go with that? And then the third takeaway is, can I identify at least one person, one group, or one space, one being? Maybe I'm most authentic with my dog or with my cat, wherever is the easiest place to start. Can I identify at least one person, one group, one being where I can show up as is? I can show up tired. I can show up exhausted, and I can show up happy. Sometimes when we talk about inauthentic relationships or unhealthy relationships, happiness can be a trigger, right? Especially if we're in relationships that are competitive or again, to have that power struggle. But allow me to show up as is. Can I identify at least one person, one space, or one being that allow me to show up as is? And if I can't, how do I then create it? The Dr. Tara community is open. You can welcome, like somebody's comment that says something here. How do I then create it? Google is your friend. How do I find a group that encourages X, Y, and Z? And so when we think about this too, and same as writing a contract with yourself and holding yourself accountable, so that brings in that compassion and honesty. So, and I'm down for contracts, but I'm not down with if I don't stick to it, then I have to beat myself up, right? So I want to set us up for easy wins. And so for me, if the easiest win, but I love this idea, but so for me, if the easiest win is to start with a contract, yes, I'm going to do that. But if I'm going to do the contract, my terms and conditions for myself are 3 to 5 days. I don't put myself on 30-day contracts because guess what? I'm a fail by 9 o'clock, right? And so 3 to 5 days, what can I do? Again, today is Tuesday. What can I do until Friday? That goes inside or coincides with a value, belief, or joy. What is the easiest value? What is the easiest belief? What is the easiest joy for me to connect with? What is the easiest behavior for me to start with? Who is the easiest person? We do this other meditation. We're going to do a group of meditations. I promise you, because I've talked about it like 3 times. But it's often, and the reason why I say this is because it's often when we quiet our minds that our true selves start to show. And so when you do that, one of the things that we see is that in that quiet time and in that quiet spirit, we can see what my true desires are. And how do I allow myself to start to get just the easiest one and see that I can get this and then build that momentum to get something else. And so we are at time. This hour, for me at least, flew by. I hope it was beneficial to you all. If you are new to the Dr. Tara community, welcome. Feel free to leave your email address in the comments or send me a DM or to stay informed of upcoming events. We are in the planning stages of a lot of beautiful things that I am excited about because I want to show up authentically for myself and you all. And so thank you all so much for tuning in. Christina, as always, thank you for your comments. Everyone, thank you for your comments. But I hope that you were able to take something from this discussion and that you'll use some of the tools in your daily life and in your daily practices. As always, this is Dr. Tara, and our tagline is, let's heal together. Have a wonderful evening. Have a wonderful week. Peace.